As the world's largest furniture retailer with 10,000 products in its range, IKEA's move towards a circular economy is a significant one. From standardising parts for easier refurbishing to piloting furniture rental, over the next 20 minutes we'll hear about the many initiatives IKEA is embarking on in its circular journey. Welcome to the Circular Economy Show from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. I'm Pippa Shawley, and today I'm taking you back to the Foundation's Summit 2020, where my colleague Joe Iles spoke to Hanna Ahlberg, IKEA's Circular Product Development Project Leader, whose circular economy journey began while living in Shanghai.
Thanks for joining us and for giving us a bit of insight into how circular design is playing out at IKEA. And I guess one place to start would be with some background. What is the story so far? How is the circular economy being adopted at the design stage at IKEA?
Well, IKEA has had a linear business model for the last 75 years, and we're now moving into a circular model. And ever since the beginning, when Ingvar started IKEA as a small mail ordering company in 1943, we have the resource-saving kind of thinking. And in the testament of a furniture dealer that Ingvar did 1976, he stated in there that waste is a mortal sin, and smart and more responsible use of resources has been in our DNA since then. 2012, we came out with the first sustainable strategy. And since the world is rapidly changing and calls for even more ambitious actions than we put in that strategy, then now when we relaunched our strategy in 2018, we made a common sustainability agenda for everyone in the IKEA franchise system and value chain. And we also then put in there to become a circular business for 2030. So that's where we are working on right now.
I don't think, well, I certainly hadn't appreciated that there was that longer legacy, or the roots of this way of thinking could be traced back for a number of decades. Obviously, in the past 10 years or so, we're seeing this surge of circular economy momentum with new, as you say, new commitments and practices being adopted, new pilots. Could you tell us a bit about the circular design approach and how that works?
Yeah. Well, we have, as you said, around 10,000 products in our range. And they're all built up from different material compositions. They all have different function, price, and styles. And when we start designing products, we always start from our democratic design. And we're now trying to move from designing great products into actually designing circular products. So with our circular design principles, we're trying to inspire our product development teams to think circular. And maybe I can explain a little bit about our design principles, circular design principles. We have 8 circular design principles, where 2 applies to all products. That's design for renewable and recycled material, and design for standardization. And for the other ones, they're dependent on what kind of circular loops the products will have to go through. And in this journey to try to design circular products, we have learned a lot. And we have a circular design guide. And we have just launched the 3rd version of that design guide. In the first version, there were very high-level goals and very hard to measure. So when we are now launching the 3rd design guide, we have changed some of the principles, because when we're learning along this journey, we realized that some of the principles were not actually totally used or correct. And to give you an example of that, we started out with a principle that was to design for assembly and disassembly. And we've actually changed that to design for disassembly and reassembly. Because we learn when working with the customers and making it possible for the customers to keep their products as long as possible, they need to be able to change that product or bring that product with them in their changing life situations. And then when you move with a product, you actually need to disassemble it, but then you need to be able to reassemble your product without it breaking. So then we realized that instead of assembly and disassemble, it's better to have disassemble and reassemble. Because assembly, we're already really good at with our assembly instructions and so on.
And I'm sure that's something that a lot of people could relate to, that moment when they're moving house and a piece of furniture was too big to fit through the door. It was flat packed on the way in, but too big on the way out. And that's a time when a lot of furniture could end up as waste.
Yeah.
And what the impression I'm getting here as well is that you mentioned, I got a sense of different approaches or strategies for all of those 10,000 products or a range of different strategies. And I think that's something that, again, is an important step. When people think of furniture, they maybe just think long-lasting is the holy grail, but actually it's more complex than that.
Yeah. When we are designing our products, as I said, we always start from democratic design. And the areas in there is form, function, price, and quality, and sustainability. So we've actually had sustainability for a long time in our product development. But it's just recently that we stated the circular design principles. And many of those, or already in democratic design, we have many of those already integrated. The design principles are already integrated there. For example, when we make products, we make flat pack products, standardized fittings, care instructions, and we are considering the material a lot.
And on the subject of product lifespan, that's not featured particularly heavily in the guide. Why is that?
Well, actually, the design for lifespan was one of our principles when we started this journey. But we realized that you have to think about lifespan so much earlier than when you go into the principles. So to be able to set a lifespan for a product, you have to look at that product and see which circular loops that product will go through. So reuse, refurbishment, remanufacture, or recycling. And then when you have looked at those loops, you can decide how long the time that product should live. So then after you've done that, after you've set the lifespan early in the project, then you can go in and look at your different principles. So that's why it's actually very important to do this in the beginning of a product.
Yeah, and certainly gives the impression that there's some thinking to be done. This isn't just a checklist or one size fits all. You have to engage your creative brain and apply design thinking to understand the lifespan or the route for those products. That kind of moves us on to business models. And I think when people think of design or circular design, sometimes they zoom straight to the form or the materials. But business model design is really important as well. So what's the connection for you and for IKEA between product design and business models?
Well, I mean, here it's really important that the whole system enables circularity. Because what's the use for us to design circular products if they're not handling in that way? You can take an example of a recycled plastic bag that ends up in landfill. It bears the same environmental impact as any other plastic product that would end up there. So if we don't if we design for reuse, refurbishment, remanufacture, and recycling, and it's not handled that way from the customers, then we have a big issue. So we want to make our products to live as long as possible. And we've understood that it's really important to involve the customer in this. And we want our customers to adopt circular behaviors. So we're right now working on setting the preconditions for this. To prolong the life of the product, we need, for example, to expand our spare part offer. We realize that we need to have more services around this, and also to be able to communicate both with our customers and with our coworkers around this. And we have different tests with leasing and renting and refurbishment. And it's also become very obvious for us that in those cases, standardization and optimization is a huge, it makes a big impact. And here it's also about spare parts. And then it's, of course, to design the products according to this. We also have a huge opportunity because we have our whole value chain under our umbrella. So using our IKEA network, we can make big independent changes to fully enable circularity. But of course, we cannot work just in vacuum. We need to work together with others to make this happen. And an example there could be recycling, for example. We don't see this as our business capability to develop. So we need to find strong cooperations with others that can do this for us. And then also when it comes to laws and standards and so on, it's important. We want to play a big part there so that we can influence the decision makers and share our learnings with them to be influencing.
The big being bigger than IKEA, bigger than potentially the furniture industry, and a space for some pre-competitive collaboration, which is something we hear a lot about at the foundation through the network. Just going back to the principles, when I was reading through them, something that struck me was there wasn't much mention of metrics, I mean, or the conventional ones at least. When speaking with designers, something that comes up a lot is how will I measure and how will I know I'm making the right decision? And people often turn to metrics like life cycle assessment or some other carbon calculation to try and guide them along the way. I got the sense from what you've said today and from knowing a bit about your circular design guide that it's more principles led. Can you speak to that at all?
It is very principle led, but the important thing going into this journey was that it actually was going to be measurable, because we can't move anything that's not possible to measure. So when we set up this system to actually measure how circular our furniture or our whole range is, then it was a very important part to actually being able to measure. So what we did is that each product actually has a percentage when the score is done. And that percentage says how circular that product is. I think it's easier if I maybe go in a little bit to explain this for you. So the design principles are used when we create a recipe, and the recipes are then used when we assess our products. And to give you an example, if we do a work chair, for example, we make a whole group out of work chairs and look at them as because they have the same circular capabilities. And then we look at our design principles, and we make different criteria under the design principles. So if you would take the example of a work chair, then and the example of the design principle for standardization, design for standardization, then the recipe would actually be, is this work chair designed with standardized fittings, for example? It can be many parts under the recipe, but that could be one part. And then when we do the assessment of a work chair, say Leif Arne that we have in the range or any other chair, then we look at that chair and say, does then this chair, Leif Arne, have standard fittings? And if it does, then it gets a 2 as a score. If it's partly, so some fittings are standardized but not all, then it gets a 1. And if it doesn't have any standardized parts, it gets a 0. And then we take those scores for each principle and put them together. And then it becomes a total percentage score of how circular that product is. And then we actually use that score to create a roadmap going forward and explain how all our products will be circular by 2030.
That's really nice. And I think the kind of 0 to 2 shows, rather than incremental change, actually could signal different pathways. Are we choosing standardized fittings or are we not using standardized fittings? Which I think I often think about how we can be supporting designers at that development stage, the product conception stage, and signaling those different pathways seems like a good way to do it, a good way to give advice. Just
recipes are also, the recipes are also really good when you go in and design new products, because then you can see where you actually don't score that high, and you can go in and make sure that the next product will actually score a lot higher.
So the recipes and the principles, they apply to the existing 10,000 products and the new ones on the horizon?
Yes.
Now, thinking about all the other designers and creative people that may be watching this and on a similar journey, maybe a few paces behind you and IKEA on the journey, but on the same road nonetheless. Something we hear is that, is the customer ready for this? It's something that crops up occasionally. We've spoken about it with some other speakers at this year's summit. How do you think about your relationship with the customer and whether you're offering something that is circular that they didn't even know they wanted yet, or waiting for them to see the demand? How do you think about that?
Well, our aim here is to make it as simple as possible for the customer. We always, of course, want to put the customer in focus with our vision, a better everyday life for the many people. This is super important for us. And what this is doing with the circular design is really to make it easy for customer through life-changing moments or through life to live with our products as long as possible. So we want to make it easy for them to fix the product, to move with the product, or to change the product in any way. Or if you want to get rid of the product, we also want to be there to make it easy to get to pass on the product to someone else. But of course, it's not only the customers. It's a whole value chain transformation, and everyone needs to do their part. I mean, circular product design is one part of it, but then making sure that develop the supply chain for circular flows or sourcing sustainable material and focusing on renewable and recycled content is also a very big part here. So we're not putting everything on the customer, but we want to make it as easy as possible for the customers. That's our focus.
So giving them perhaps we could imagine the future aisles or the marketplace at IKEA being easier to make really good choices that support a circular economy.
Yes.
Just before we finish, Hanna, I have one last question. Something else we've been picking up at this year's summit, speaking with designers and people who are shaping their career around circular design, about personally what the sense of reward or satisfaction they achieve in in working on circular economy. I was reading your bio beforehand, and I know that you're passionate about the outdoors and the environment in which you live. Can you say anything about that? What this brings to you, being able to work on circular economy day to day?
Well, 2015, I moved abroad. I moved to Shanghai, and I then got to realize how it is to live in a world that's actually not functioning when it comes to breathing the air. So for me, that became very obvious that we really need to make a change, because the whole world cannot look like that. So for me, it's a very strong passion. It's about being able to keep the nature and the everything like it is, or make it better. And I felt a strong connection that I can't keep on making more products that goes into the world that will not be taken care of, or will not, nobody would take responsible for. So working for IKEA and being into this circular transformation really makes me feel proud. And it's, I go to work every day and it feels like we can really make a difference.
Thanks, Hanna. And I hope that story, or a snippet of your story, is something that either resonates with people watching, or that they can aspire to in their own company, or as they reach a juncture in their career.
Feeling like our work can make a difference is something I think many of us listening to that conversation will hopefully agree with. It was great to hear Hanna talk about the importance of involving customers and colleagues in IKEA's circular mission too. In the next episode of the Circular Economy Show podcast, we'll be getting tips on how creativity can help find solutions. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. And if you'd like to get in touch, drop us a line via one of our social media channels. You can find the details in the show notes below. Thanks for listening, and see you next time on the Circular Economy Show.